Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I am David Pendergrass. A common argument that theists use for God's existence is what's called, the fancy name is the teleological argument, which just, of course, in Greek just means a telos, in Greek means end or goal. Sometimes it's called the FineTuning argument. And when I hear atheists respond to the FineTuning argument, they respond to it in one of two ways. The chief way, their response demonstrates that they have no idea what the fine-tuning argument is. And I want to talk about in this podcast. The other response is something different, where they seem to understand the point, but then make a response I think is not convincing. But in a nutshell, the universe is fine-tuned for life. So let me get at this in different ways. This is a non-religious idea. The idea that the universe is fine-tuned for life is a belief held by many astrophysicists. It's been argued by atheists, Jews, Christians. It doesn't really matter, because it's just a fact that the reason why life is able to develop and to live, any life, I didn't say humans, but just life, any kind of living being whatsoever, anything, algae, it doesn't matter, any kind of life whatsoever. The only reason life can exist is because it lives, the life develops in our universe, in a universe that allows it. I know right off the bat when a person does not understand the fine-tuning argument, when they respond with anything that is called the anthropic principle. And I want to talk about that very briefly. When you oftentimes, and if you look on YouTube or you hear in discussions, some people call it the puddle analogy, any analogy you want. But the idea is, of course, that the puddle analogy is that water fits into the hole just perfectly, and we say, wow, look how special this is. First one say, well, if you're water in a puddle inside of a hole, of course it fits perfectly. It's made to do that. Of course it is. This is just a version of anthropic principle. That is, we're not surprised that life exists in the universe because we live in a universe which allows life. Now, the anthropic principle was first developed several decades ago. Some have the weaker anthropic principle, the stronger or strong anthropic principle. I think there's another one called the final anthropic principle. All kinds of ways to talk about this. The anthropic principle is not responding to the fine-tuning argument. So I know right away that a person does not understand the fine-tuning argument when they give anything whatsoever that is related to the anthropic principle. Whatever analogy you give, it's the puddle analogy or anything else at all, if it sounds like the anthropic principle, it is not an argument against fine-tuning. Let me say more about this. The anthropic principle, in a nutshell, and there's different versions, and I know if you're a specialist, this sounds unfair, you can read the literature for yourself, but in general, the anthropic principle is saying it's not surprising that life exists in our universe. Why? Because our universe can sustain life. So it's not surprising. Just like it's not surprising that water fits the hole perfectly to form a puddle. Because that's what would happen. It's forced to fill up that hole with enough water, it's going to fill it perfectly. Well, it's like that with life and universe. So anytime a person says anthropic principle is a response to fine-tuning, they misunderstand the argument, because the anthropic principle about life is supposed to exist in our universe has nothing to do with fine-tuning. Nothing. So, or say another way, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself a lot in this podcast, but I find this to be such a common misunderstanding. I mean, what spawns this podcast, I was listening to an atheist YouTube response to Frank Turek, who's a Christian apologist, and the person, again, the atheist, who apparently is quite popular on YouTube, again, respectfully, completely misunderstands Frank Turek's point, because he does what most people do who don't understand it. They bring up the anthropic principle, which is not at all a response to the fine-tuning. When people argue for fine-tuning, they are not arguing that it sure is shocking that life exists in our universe. That is not the argument. No one who knows fine-tuning says, man, wow, or woman, it sure is surprising life exists in our universe. That is not the fine-tuning argument. It's not. It is just not. If that were the fine-tuning argument, then a proper response would be the so-called anthropic principle, which is, the principle is, of course there's life in our universe, dummy, because our universe is fine-tuned for it. So it's not surprising at all. It's like if someone said, I go to this building and I'm shocked to find these children in there called students. The person responds, no, dummy, it's not shocking at all. This is called a school. It was set up to have these children called students. It's exactly what we'd expect. We would expect to find life in this universe. We would expect to find it because our universe has the exact constants and quantities necessary for life. So it's not shocking. The fine-tuning argument is not at all that. It is not, I am surprised there is life in this universe. That's not shocking. That's not shocking at all. The fine-tuning argument is about a different problem altogether, and that is, why is our universe finely tuned? Why is it that there are almost countless amount of constants and quantities that have to be in the exact right parameters to produce life? And by life, I mean life. That is to say, most of these things, if they didn't occur, and I talk all about this in my book, you can read whole books on this subject and watch YouTube videos, but, I mean, stars would never have formed. I mean, the periodic table would never have occurred. We're not talking about human life, and that's one of my major problems with the anthropic principle in general, is anthropos in Greek means human or man, and anthropic principle is not about man, and that's one of the things that I think it causes confusion, is people think that when Christians particularly, or theists in general, talk about life existing, they hear the word anthropic sometimes and think, oh, you think humans are special, but different kinds of humanoids could have developed. And all this is just they're just confused. Okay, so if a person brings up the anthropic principle or puddles or whatever analogy you want, they have misunderstood the fine-tuning. The fine-tuning argument is not, I'm shocked life exists in this universe. The fine-tuning problem is this. Why is it that our universe is fine-tuned for life? That's the question. It's not that life exists in our universe, but that our universe has the exact quantities and constants necessary so that life could develop. Or, as people often call it, a life-permitting universe. A life-permitting universe. So what is shocking is, come to find out, it is absolutely necessary that an enormous amount of very specific quantities and constants are necessary for life to exist, and our universe is the winning one. Hey, I'm going to take a quick break. Please listen real quickly. Please don't ever forget, I have a whole website, davidpendergrass.com. It's full of other information. I have Amazon Alexa skill app that you can use for free. I have a Twitter account, Dr. D. Pendergrass. I can send you encouraging texts for free. I'll go to davidpendergrass.com and see all the information there. It can be difficult as a Christian to know what to do with our money. And there are all kinds of good books out there to read, but I encourage you, if you want something short and sweet and to the point, check out my book, Give It Away, on Amazon.com. It's very cheap. Go there today to get Give It Away, and it's a wonderful study to use in small groups. It has discussion questions and reflection questions ready to go. It's a 4-week study on how the earliest Christians used money and their possessions.
Have you read A Skeptic Challenges a Christian yet? This is Dr. David Pendergrass's amazing book. If you've not read it, you can get it on Amazon. And you could even buy one for a friend. Grab a copy and read it today.
Hey, it would help me a whole lot. If you like these podcasts, let people know about it. Just share the link. Just share the link. What would Jesus do? He would share the link. That's what I think. I think he would do that. Let people know about A Glimpse of the Kingdom today. Okay, let's pick back up where I left off. Imagine a cruise ship. I just had a 20th year wedding anniversary with my wife, of course, and it was great. We went on a real quick cruise, but it was fun to have a quick cruise. And we went down to the Bahamas. And on this cruise ship, they had a lot of lifeboats. A lot. I'm sure probably numerically they probably have, ever since the Titanic, but they have enough lifeboats to be able to seat more people that actually could be stationed on the boat, is what I suspect. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, there are a lot of them. Big boats. And they have all kinds of supplies in the boats, water and food and all kinds of stuff. They're ready to go. They're just ready to go. Imagine you're on a cruise ship that's big enough to have trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, literally trillions of lifeboats. And almost every one of them has holes in them. So trillions of them. Just imagine trillions. That's hard to imagine. This lifeboat is as large as the earth. There are trillions of lifeboats. And then the ship starts going down, and I happen to go, without knowing ahead of time, which boat doesn't have the holes in it. And I get in the boat. Me and my wife get in the boat, and we go, wow, this is amazing. We're alive. Everyone else died when they got another lifeboat, and someone else made it. They go, dummy. It's not surprising at all that you're alive. You're in the lifeboat that was made to be alive in. It doesn't have the holes. It has all the supplies. And I say, I didn't say I'm surprised I'm alive in this boat. I said I'm surprised that we chose the right one. I'm surprised that we chose the lifeboat that didn't lead toward death. Every other option led straight to death. Of all the options, without knowing, we were blindfolded. It was the middle of the night, and we happened to choose when we didn't have to choose. We didn't have to choose this one. It is much, 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 much more likely to have chosen a boat that would have caused destruction. It's like that with the universe. The universe supports life. Not surprising. So it's not surprising that we live in our universe. It's surprising that our universe is a life-permitting universe. That it's a lifeboat that supports life. That is shocking, and that is the problem of fine-tuning. That the laws of gravity and the weak and strong nuclear force and the weight of certain molecules and atoms and on it goes. You need to have these exquisitely fine-tuned parameters to allow life. Well, David, how do you know? It's usually said pretty snotty, I guess. How do you know, David? Well, I don't. I read specialist. I'm not a mathematician. I read the specialist. And they tell me, like Hoyle, who was an atheist, who said the same thing. He said when he studied the hydrogen, the atom, he said, looks like someone's been monkeying with the physics here. You just figure out, if this force had been off by 0.0000000000001% stronger or weaker, then the atoms would never even join together. Things like that. And you can just test it. You can change the parameters on some things and say what would have happened. Some things can be deduced. Sometimes the math just proves it. But there's an enormous amount of parameters. Like these dials were just right. Why is our universe that way? That is a problem. That is a huge problem that causes astrophysicists to scratch their head. Now, an average theist will say, well, that problem has been solved. The reason why our universe is life-permitting, that we run of all the lifeboats, the one that's life-permitting is because God fine-tuned it. He wanted to make a universe that allowed life. It's not surprising we live in this universe. It's surprising that we have a universe at all that is life-permitting. And if you ever hear a person, I'm just repeating myself on purpose. If you ever hear a person say, yeah, what about the puddle analogy? What about the anthropic principle? You know right away they do not comprehend the fine-tuning problem. They do not comprehend the fine-tuning problem. So I'll say it one more time, probably to beat this dead horse to the ground. If someone says, yeah, but we're not surprised we're alive in this universe. Of course we're alive in this universe. And I go, my response is, of course. Right. Why did you even bring that up? No one is arguing it's shocking that we're alive in this universe. No one is arguing for that. The fact is, our universe, this life-permitting universe, the one we live in, didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to be life-permitting. Why is it? Why is it? The anthropic principle has nothing to do with the fine-tuning. Okay. So when people do understand the problem, they don't say the anthropic principle. That demonstrates just profound ignorance or disingenuity. But I'll assume they're just incompetent. I guess that's kinder than to assume they're lying. They're just incompetent and they can't understand what fine-tuning argument is. But if they're not incompetent, they understand the argument, then their recourse is to say usually one of two things. They're going to say, A, it's just a mystery, and we'll never know. Well, my response to that is, okay. I mean, you can say that. You can say just a mystery, we'll never know. Okay. I mean, you can. Okay. If that's emotionally satisfying to you, okay. Or letter B, they're going to say, well, we expect that we live in a multiverse. That there are, as far all the specialists I've read, even atheistic specialists typically do not believe there's an infinite amount of multiverses, but that there's a limited amount of multiverses. And they say, well, there's about 10 to the 500 power. So it's like one of those universes had to pop out. Well, the response to that is, no, it's not. Again, it's you do the math, and I can't do the math. What I'm saying is, if you read the literature yourself, you'll see that that alone still doesn't cut it. It is still more likely that every universe that came out of the bubbling foam, even if that's how it happened, at the initial states of the universe, all the universes popped into this bubbling foam and it keeps popping out. Even then, it is more likely that every single universe ever produced ever by this quantum fluctuation foam would be prohibitive to life, devoid of life. It is staggering that a universe that is life permitting was ever, created, developed, was born. That our universe is fine-tuned for life is absolutely bizarre. So if I were an atheist, if I were an atheist or skeptic of all the stuff, and I would say fine-tuning argument or problem, you might say, is a fundamentally enormous, mysterious problem that I would go to letter A, which is we just don't know. And maybe one day we'll figure it out, but we have no idea. I wouldn't go to letter B. I think letter B also mathematically is silly. It is simply still more likely that we would that a life permitting universe would never exist. It's just more likely. Mathematically, it's much more likely. So, and then again, I'm just repeating this. If someone says, yeah, but it's very, very likely that we would live here. The answer is yes, it is very likely we live it. Yes, we're in a universe that's life permitting. That's not the point. That's not the problem. Can we please change the subject? The subject is not, is it shocking we live in this universe? That's not the shock. That's not the point I'm making. What is shocking is that there is such a thing as a life-permitting universe in the first place. That's what's shocking. Now, I really haven't said it yet because I've assumed, if you know, that maybe you don't in the podcast, and I'm sorry, but I've been assuming it. The fine-tuning argument, there's different versions of it, but basically like Bill Craig's most well-known one is, the universe is fine-tuned. That's premise one, which is basically undenied by the majority of astrophysicists that I've seen and read, that it is a standard understanding that the universe, in fact, is fine-tuned for life. Premise two is that fine-tuning is either caused by or due to chance, design, or necessity. Seems to me that's only three options. And then the third premise is it's not due to chance or necessity. Therefore, it's designed. And of course, if it's designed, there must be a designer. And Craig and others argue that it can't be based on chance because I've already alluded to this. It's still astronomically improbable that a life-permitting lifeboat would ever exist, ever, and yet it does. And that's usually what they say is, even if it's 10 to the power of a billion, and there are 100 billion, trillion zeros, and sure are lucky. But most, in my experience, in the literature I've read and the videos I've watched, most astrophysicists don't say that. They don't say, sure are lucky. They realize that's just silly, that this is too problematic. It's too unlikely. It's not like the lottery. It's not like the lottery on human terms. The odds, take the lottery odds and multiply it times a trillion. And remember, in the lottery, they get the winning ticket. They pull the number out until someone wins the ticket. So someone's going to win. But imagine if no one had to win. What if it's trillion numbers, and then 100 million people will play? it's still likely no one's going to win. And so if they pull out the rolling numbers and they say, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, blah, 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 and then no one won, everybody goes, yeah, that was the most likely scenario. The odds are against you. It's just against you. Well, that's like it is with the universe, but more. Others say if it's not by chance, it must be by necessity, that the universe has to be this way. And that's, as far as I've read and can tell, no one argues that the universe, in fact, does not have to be this way. The quantities and constants of the universe could have been anything else. You could change the dials, metaphorically speaking, to anything. The laws of gravity, the force of gravity, why in the world would the force of gravity need to be the way it is? Now, there are atheist responses to that, and you can read them and see if you find them convincing. But my point right now is not to argue for the fine-tuning argument. I'm just trying to bring clarity that if you hear a person bring up the anthropic principle to the fine-tuning argument, it demonstrates the person has no idea what the fine-tuning argument is. And what I keep saying a billion times, trying to help you, listener, is this is a quick way to remember it. It's not surprising we live in this universe. It's surprising that there is a universe that allows life at all. Say it this way. It is not improbable that there's life in this universe. It is extremely improbable that a universe would ever exist that allows life. Anyway, that's the difference. I think I'm going to go play in a puddle. Well, the conversation isn't finished. You can always reach out to me on social media. Are you on Facebook? I am too. @Glimpse of the Kingdom. Glimpse of the Kingdom on Facebook. Be sure to like it and you can see updates there. Also, if you're on Twitter, check me out at Dr. D. Pendergrass, Dr. D. Pendergrass, or @Glimpse the King, @Glimpse the King. And I try my best to respond to comments and questions on there as quickly as I can. If you want more, there are many more resources on the podcast and my blog. Go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and you can see a full list of the podcast, and my blog is available for free. Are you active in a church right now? I'd be happy to come out to your church and do all kinds of classes and workshops there. Check out davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com for more information. And may God in His great grace give you even just a glimpse of His kingdom this week. See you next time.